Alright, Sense here reviewing Birds of Prey, which I saw last night. I really thought it had some good visuals. The visuals were pretty good. I mean, I feel like that's pretty much a good staple of most DC movies. Out of the ones I've seen, which I haven't seen that many to be honest, they've mostly been pretty memorable in terms of their visuals and their aesthetics and their colors and, you know, various stuff they do with slow motion and other things like that. This movie was, you know, par for the course. I definitely think there was a few fight scenes in here which visually will stand out. Personally, I'm not the biggest fight scene fan, so most of them I kind of not tuned out, but kind of zoned out during a lot of it. But there were a couple that were interesting and didn't last too long, so they kept my attention, and I felt they were pretty good. So I guess that's mostly it for visuals. I don't know, towards the conclusion, a lot of stuff were very cloudy and foggy and stuff, which was, I don't know, I didn't feel like it really had a big point to it, but it was interesting. Interesting to look at. In terms of editing was pretty good. In terms of story, I think this was probably the most cohesive, most straightforward DC movie I've seen so far, and one that I actually enjoyed. Characters, motivations, and everything worked for the most part. Like, this event happened, that event happened, that caused this event to happen, that caused that event to happen. It all felt like it was thought together and put together nicely. And I mean, you definitely notice, like, right in the beginning, there's a lot of quick, you know, montages or whatever, just quick flashes of videos stuff. You know, DC, especially Suicide Squad, which, you know, precedes it, really leaned on that a lot. But this time, they actually built off later stuff happened that were related to this stuff that got thrown on the screen during the montages. So I felt like that was very interesting, felt pretty rewarding, and actually felt like they were using all these flashbacks and quick scenes to their actual benefit, to their actual advantage. The only more downside of those is it was very clear they couldn't have Jared Leto in there to be Joker, so there was a lot of scenes where you're like, Joker did this, Joker did that, but you were clearly seeing the Joker do anything. I don't know, it was a little weird. Like, I felt like you could purposely tell they were shooting stuff away where you wouldn't need to see the Joker. But other than that, I think story-wise, this was pretty solid. Again, I mean, I think it did have a bit of an issue when you got to conclusion and it was all cool and all, and you had these moments and everything, but you're like, seeing as the story really focuses on Harley Quinn as the main character, the final battle, final whatever, wasn't specifically about her. Like, she learns a lesson and decides to make a change right up before the battle. So most of the battle was pretty pointless, and in the very final showdown, again, didn't really need anything from Harley Quinn. It could have been any old schmuck who was in the rest of the movie, just showed up at the end and could have stood in her place and everything would have worked out exactly the same. Like, it just felt a little weird there at the very ending, but I think that's partially the issue of the movie, trying to tell this grander story while also focusing on Harley Quinn. And so Harley Quinn's journey was, you know, carrying the movie, and then it would fall behind while the movie events happen, and then it would come to the foreground again, carry it, and then fall behind. And so it had a little bit of back and forth between focusing on the events that happened to her, how they change her, how she reacts to them, and then jump into stuff that had nothing really to do with her, and it had more to do with the other characters, but seeing as we were never really following them, and they were never not very important. Again, it helped make this overall cohesive story where you were like, oh, I get why this person's doing that, I get why that person's doing this, but at the same time, it didn't particularly pertain to Harley, so it kind of made her feel somewhat unimportant in a lot of scenes, and I feel like the further along you got, the less and less important she seemed to the story. And then by the very ending, I really felt like, you know, she could have gotten killed right before the ending, and the ending would have roughly played out the way it did anyway. So, you know, I don't know if I particularly would say it's a negative. It was just something I kind of felt watching it. And then, let's see, normally I like to talk about music and audio and other stuff like that. I don't know, this one didn't really jump out to me. There was a lot of songs you're like, oh yeah, I know that one. There's a lot of stuff you're like, oh yeah, I see that, but nothing particularly interesting that I'd write home about. The characters is like a big focus to me, and the other one is the actors. I definitely enjoyed Mary, whatever, I cannot remember her name, I'll put it up somewhere, but she was in Scott Pilgrim. I really enjoyed her character here. They did some great humor that, I mean, it's the type of humor, you see it in a decent amount in recent movies, that kind of fish out of water humor, but it still worked really well, I think, and probably the funniest stuff were all around her character, so definitely big props for that. You know, Harley Quinn herself was pretty funny. Most of the other characters were there and were pretty cool, but I don't know. I personally didn't really attach to them too much. They were just there to crack jokes and punch people for the most part. I think they did do a little bit with Black Canary, giving her, I guess when it comes to actual emotional scenes, they gave a lot of those to Black Canary, which was, I guess that was pretty good. But again, she kind of got, she got her chance to do some fighting in the final fights, and then she got sidelined for the rest of it. She had a good big moment and then sidelined. So I guess that's what I'm saying, I guess, for the final moments of the movie is a lot of the fighting, a lot of whatever, ended up not, like, I don't know, it didn't really conclude anybody's story arc, in my opinion. It's just like the fight they all had, and afterwards you're like, you know what, let's work together. But the fight itself was just a long fight that didn't particularly, in my opinion, end any particular person's story arc. It rather just wrapped up the overall idea of, Black Mask doing this, we do this, we gotta stop him. It wrapped that up nicely, but it didn't really, I feel like for most characters. Well, as I was trying to say before I got rudely interrupted, the fight was just, again, that's just me just not being a huge fan of some of those big fights, which would be funny. Mention some of my favorite movies, they all have big fights in it, superhero stuff, or otherwise, it's just like a lot of big fights. You think I would be, I guess maybe that's why I'm so critical of fight scenes, but I feel like this one had a whole lot of fat that could have been trimmed down to have a much straightforward, in my opinion, more entertaining story that didn't revolve around just hordes of faceless mooks getting punched in the face and us sitting there like, oh, okay, well, yeah, that's obviously gonna happen. Like, like it's typically most movies, if there's gonna be any threat to the main character, it's gonna be a named character or someone we have some backstory to. People who we've never seen before, never hear from later on again, they're not gonna have any important moments. So when you've seen them just fight, anything longer than 30 seconds, you kind of lost me. It just seems pointless. But that's kind of my general opinion on, in general, this movie itself. Like I said, it still had a couple fights that kept my interest, even though they lasted longer than 30 seconds. They were just not towards the end. They were more the earlier fights. I guess I could also point out that in terms of talking about these characters, I'm not super familiar with their comic book versions, so I can't really, I don't have anything to compare their characters to. So I'm just saying their characters were all serviceable, not particularly that interesting to me, other than Huntress. Huntress was very interesting, and I'd love to see more with her. But everybody else was more just, they did the role they needed to do. There was some good humor. There was some pointing out, some somewhat fourth wall breaking, pointing out that, man, this character's acting like a cop movie character, or this guy acting like a something type of character. It's like, yeah, they were, because that's what they were doing. They were just filling their role in the story in that sense. Like I said, most of them didn't really need to go very much beyond that. I, enjoyed pretty much all the actors in their roles. Again, I think a lot of the characters were just kind of written to not be that interesting, in my opinion, but they all did their whole job very well. But again, special shout outs to Mary Winston Smith, I think it is. Could be butchering that once again. Ewan McGregor, again, he did a pretty good job. I didn't find his character all that interesting. Like, he had a few scenes that were funny and were leading towards some bigger character. And he definitely had enough quirks, but I just felt like I didn't see much behind those quirks. Like, his backstory gets explained in one sentence, and that's pretty much it. But the rest of it is just him being somewhat weird and just not really a good person. Again, I thought Black Canary had like some good emotional scenes. I really enjoyed that. I do not remember the actress's name. And for the fourth character, I'm also going to say I do not know the actor's name, but it was Mr. Zaz, or Zaz, or however you pronounce it. I read a couple comics which had him in it. I never paid attention to it, never liked him. It's just a creepy serial killer who cut himself based off his victims or whatever. But here they made him somewhat of an interesting character, in my opinion. Like, he was somewhat unpredictable, but I just also liked his attitude in relation to most of the stuff that was happening around him, and just the way he carried himself and everything. I don't know. It was, again, didn't say too much. It wasn't too much of a background behind it. He just did what he needed to do and got taken out when he didn't get taken out, But I think they still made him interesting enough where I was like, I wouldn't really mind knowing a little bit more about him. Like, him and Huntress were probably the ones I'd like to know more about, like where they came from. Not where Huntress, I'd rather know what she does next. Him, I'd rather know more of his backstory. Everybody else, you know, they're okay. Harley Quinn, I mean, she was one of the better characters in Suicide Squad. Wasn't my favorite, but she was one of the better ones. And again, she continues to be pretty interesting and entertaining in this one. And, you know, I'll be fine seeing her in some more movies. And then Cassandra Cain, I'm vaguely aware that she's a comic book character. I mean, it might be interesting to see what she does next. Another thing about it I will say, which was a little weird to me, was I think this was supposed to be Gotham, because Joker and Harley Quinn and stuff, but there was a lot of, I don't know, a lot of things about it that didn't feel very Gotham-y to me. Like, one thing, I feel like Gotham's always been crawling with a lot of killers and a lot of costume people just doing stuff, mostly criminal stuff. And this one, the city felt oddly empty in that respect. It felt like it was very much just mafia town. Like, it was just mafias, which I guess maybe that's their version of Gotham they're going with. That's why Joker is more of a criminal gang leader, and everybody's just into gangs and gangs and mafia, instead of, you know, having your Mr. Freezes and your Scarecrows and whatnot running around doing their own thing. It feels like those characters wouldn't really fit in this world as much, and instead we would focus more on, you know, Penguins and Jokers, and I guess Riddler might fit in there. But anyway, I guess that's all I roughly got to say about Birds of Prey. So I think I'll give this movie a 3 out of 5. It was a pretty good, enjoyable watch. I'm not super eager to go rush out and watch it again, but hey, if someone wanted to watch it and it's like, hey, Saturday afternoon, let's get popcorn, throw in Birds of Prey, I'll do it. Definitely watch it before I watch Suicide Squad again. And I didn't hate Suicide Squad. Actually, I kind of did, but that's a whole other story. We'll see you next week with a different review.